so let's get right into this. Basically, a lot of you are wondering where kind of like the quasi birthplace of why the SSA really pushed to create CDI units to bring the investigative power, not to leave it in HHS's control, but to move it over to the Social Security Administration. Like, what place started that? Where is abuse very high? Where do we see a lot of scams, a lot of problems? Where do we see judges, doctors, attorneys also committing fraud related to Social Security benefits? Well, that place where the quasi birthplace of it, I mean, it's not the technical, but it's like, a good, it's like one of the things that was the major push, the major pedal push for basically a lot of the reasons we have investigators following people around when it comes to Social Security benefits. That place specifically is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is known for high-level fraud related to Social Security disability benefits. And I mean high-level fraud. I mean the attorneys are part of it, the doctors are part of it, the judges were part of it, high-level fraud. Now, a lot of it, they don't have that there as much nowadays, okay? But back in the day, they had it. They had it bad. It wasn't good. So that's kind of the reality of what we're facing here. All right, let me get through this real quick. Social Security disability insurance fraud conspiracy in Puerto Rico. This is from the Office of the Inspector General. Let's go through it real quick. And I'm going to read it to you and kind of annotate it so you understand exactly if you're in Puerto Rico, if you want to go to Puerto Rico, they have the hairs on the back of their neck up when people go to Puerto Rico because of the history of a lot of the fraud that came from that particular area. Okay. I mean, just to note also, if you've ever looked at like videos of Puerto Rico, like go look up drone footage on YouTube about how beautiful Puerto Rico is. It is gorgeous. Like a lot of those people who made money off of the whole Bitcoin thing or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, whatever, all that stuff. Keep in mind, like they all moved there and bought up houses, especially because of the taxation system of how the properties work. All right, let's check this out real quick. Good afternoon, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Members Becerra, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for an invitation to testify today about our ongoing disability fraud operation in Puerto Rico. As you know, we made 75 arrests in this case between August 21st and 23rd, together with our partners in the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Puerto Rico Police Department. I'll explain today how this came to pass, what it means for the disability program and for our organization, and what the future holds. That said, I must first note that this is an ongoing criminal investigation, which will, to some extent, limit what I can share with the public forum. Okay. While I'm very proud of our special agents who worked long and hard on this case and who executed this extensive arrest operation over a period of several hours seamlessly and without incident, I must also note that this operation is not unique in the history of this office and does not represent a departure from our usual practice. In fact, this operation illustrates the most basic purpose for which the office was created: to protect the integrity of the Social Security programs and conserve its funds for those who are truly deserving. In pursuing this goal, we have made and will, it's intro stuff, continue to make significant efforts to ensure doctors, attorneys, and other facilitators of the disability claims process cannot perpetrate large-scale criminal conspiracies against the SSA. And remember, what they're saying here is it was attorneys, doctors, medical facilities, medical program payment centers, the people who like submit things to Medicare, all of those people were like, in Puerto Rico, if you're wondering where fraud was practiced a lot, in Puerto Rico. SSA's Office of Inspector General was established in 1995, and we quickly created 10 investigative field divisions, closely tracking SSA's 10 regions. Like SSA, we placed Puerto Rico under the umbrella of our New York field division so that our special agent in charge would be able to work with SSA's Regional 2 Commissioner for all matters concerning the Commonwealth. As early as 2000, we sought to establish a cooperative disability investigations unit in Puerto Rico. But at that time, we were unable to acquire a viable law enforcement partner for the unit. So the way it works is they'll go out and they'll snitch police officers, sheriffs, law enforcement people, agents, stuff like that to join their program. And sometimes they're a cop and they also work for the SSA at the same time. That's very common. And they'll keep their capacity as an officer and also be an investigator for the SSA. Okay. So as early as 2000, they begin the process of that, combating program fraud in the Commonwealth, receiving and reviewing individual allegations, conducting investigations, and obtaining criminal prosecutions or civil remedies. For example, in 2012, a woman from Yacao, Puerto Rico, entered into civil consent order in the U.S. District Court agreeing to repay $34,360 that we determined she received after concealing her father's death and continuing to receive and spend his Social Security retirement benefits. Okay. November of 2009, a man who had been receiving benefits for a mood disorder, along with his wife and 3 children, since 2005 was found by our investigators to be working at a supermarket and getting paid in cash to conceal his employment from the SSA. Both the man and the supermarket that employed him entered into civil settlements with the Department of Justice. The supermarket agreed to pay $60,000, and the man agreed to return to the SSA the entire $108,233 he and his family had received. In 2012, Gainobo, a woman, admitted to misrepresenting her nephew or her son in order to receive benefits for him on her deceased husband's Social Security record. She agreed in civil settlement to repay almost $93,000. These are the types of investigations our agents work every day, and every time we consider a large-scale operation like the one we're discussing today, we choose carefully and we do our homework in Puerto Rico. That homework led to the inescapable conclusion that we had an operation that merited the enormous dedication of resources it would require. So one thing you have to keep with all of this stuff in mind is that if they're spending money to follow you around and it's bigger money, they got to create reports, they got to get stuff from judges, they got to do a bunch of stuff that's going to cost a lot of money. And if they're spending a lot of money, it's got to make sense. They got to have high stakes, big potential win. We reached that conclusion only after significant preparatory work and development of the multiple allegations we received over a period of many months, during which time our San Juan office was also committed to other large-scale joint investigations. Following is an appropriate timeline of the events that culminated in this investigation. All right, so now they're going to walk you through essentially what they did with this investigation. They'll also go through essentially how Puerto Rico was pivotal for convincing the SSA to do more when it comes to larger investigations and, bringing all of the investigative work under the SSA umbrella and removing it from Health and Human Services, HHS. In 2008, our San Juan office opened a case involving the theft of birth certificates and Social Security numbers from approximately 50 schools on the island. Our special agent investigated with the FBI, the Secret Service, Immigration, yada, yada, yada. Okay, bottom line, it would continue for 2 years, resulted in 8 arrests and solidifying our already productive relationship with these entities, particularly the San Juan office of the FBI. Also in 2008, as we were working the school theft case in our usual range of individual criminal investigations, one of our special agents in Northern California had a conversation with the director of our San Francisco audit division. The agent had noted that a significant number of his disability fraud investigations involved an effective disorder diagnosis. Our auditors conducted informal research and found that of the 10 SSA offices nationwide with the highest percentage of disability recipients with the diagnosis of affective disorder, 8 of them were in Puerto Rico. From an organizational standpoint, we considered this information, consulted with the SSA, and in the absence of any specific allegations and our existing commitments and resources, decided that we would monitor the situation for a time in the hopes that an allegation would provide a starting point to look into this issue in Puerto Rico. A few months later, in 2009, November, we received such an allegation from SSA suggesting that a medical doctor and a non-attorney claimant representative, Samuel Torres Crespo, a former SSA employee, wink, 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 were submitting nearly identical medical reports for disability claimants who shared common employment history with a company that was experiencing significant downsizing. Following that initial fraud referral in November 2009, the Puerto Rico Disability Determination Services and the SSA continued to refer other matters relating to disability claims in Puerto Rico to the OIG. So when they have a big company that's basically downsizing or going out of business to some degree, and then a bunch of those people are filing for disability benefits, they're going to watch that specifically for fraud. And then, of course, Samuel Torres Crespo, basically a former SSA employee, essentially was working the system to go ahead and get people through improperly. So, a little bit of inside trading there, never a good thing when it comes to the government. All right, so In December of 2009, aware of this burgeoning issue, the OIG special agent in charge of the NYFD and the New York Regional Commissioner submitted a request to SSA for a CDI unit in Puerto Rico. We also began studying these cases, and over the ensuing 15 months, we requested and received additional information from the SSA concerning former employees of this company and patients of this doctor. So they knew they had a problem. They knew the company was downsizing. The company had a lot of people that basically were seeking some sort of check. They knew that the doctor they were using was consistent. They kept sending them to the same doctor, right? And then basically they knew that they had a person representing them who used to work for the SSA or, was interacting with the SSA in some way or some fashion and had an inside view. And as a result, they got worried because there were a lot of affected disorders. To be clear, we're all coming from the same group. You had a massively high percentage of individuals with this particular problem. Now, sometimes that's okay. Because sometimes you'll have a geographic area where there will be toxins in the water, heavy metals in the water, stuff like that. And then, you'll have a geographic area where a lot of people have the same impairments. Or you'll be by basically like a military base, and like a bunch of the people from that military base that used to live there or live around there or used to work with it or whatever, they all have some sort of thing that happened, like Camp Lejeune, or they were in this war, they were that war, and they all kind of moved to this area, and they're going to get a bunch of cases with that sort of setup. But they look at that. They look at the statistics of what types of impairments are we getting from what geographic location. Okay. All right. So in May 2010, we received an allegation, again, specifically naming Torres Crespo and the same doctor, both of whom are implicated in the case, now being prosecuted. Meanwhile, in June 2010, our San Juan office completed its extensive work in Puerto Rico on the Puerto Rico schools case, which had been opened in April 2008. No sooner had we wrapped up the case when we received another employer-based allegation suggesting that former employees of a downsized company in Puerto Rico were applying for Social Security disability benefits, all using the same doctor, with nearly identical claims. Our preliminary investigative work showed, however, that very few claimants were involved, and additional work revealed no actual similarities among the claims. In September 2010, we joined the FBI on an investigation into a widespread private insurance and healthcare fraud scheme, requiring the review of more than 500 patient files. Nevertheless, our agents continued to work with the SSA to develop the previous allegations we'd received of medical providers and claimant representative fraud. In January 2011, our San Juan office worked with the FBI to effectuate over 500 arrests. In connection with the healthcare fraud case, we asked SSA to review the patients in that case for SSA benefit implications, but there was none. Meanwhile, our close work with the FBI led to further discussions about the various allegations of medical provider and claimant representative fraud on the island. Like I said, Puerto Rico, hotspot for fraud. Soon after, in February and March 2011, we received two additional allegations involving doctors and SSA disability claims. SSAs and our developmental work on these and the prior allegations dating back to November 2009 into what was now as many as 17 medical providers was finally bearing fruit. On March 24th, 2011, we opened a criminal investigation. And remember, there were a lot of doctors who were part of this ring, okay? And I remember it because when they came out with this story, like I started my firm, and I noticed that some of the Spanish-speaking, attorneys were in big trouble, and some of them weren't. But some of them were in big trouble. Like they were never going to practice law again. So, because they had an office in Puerto Rico and they had an office in the United States. Okay. All right. So we then deployed an investigative response team to San Juan to commence work with the Puerto Rico Police Department and the FBI, including a surveillance of some 100 investigative subjects, undercover operations, interviews, and other investigative work. So just to clarify, surveillance of some 100 investigative subjects. Imagine the amount of people that they would need to investigate, follow around 100 potential subjects, undercover operations, interviews, and other investigative work. Over the course of the investigation, we would deploy 14 different investigative response teams. 14 different teams, not just 14 people, 14 different teams, drawing personnel from our other field divisions and from headquarters to supplement our San Juan agents. They needed so many people, they had to grab SSA OIG personnel from different parts of the nation just to send them to Puerto Rico. Okay, that's how big this was. While this work was taking place, we also continued our efforts to establish the CDI unit in San Juan, negotiating with the SSA and the PRPD. The Commissioner of the Social Security announced the creation of the unit in December 2012, and the OIG's CDI team leader began receiving and reviewing fraud allegations in January of 2013. Now, keep in mind, just to be fair, Puerto Rico got an actual CDI unit before some states that you would have definitely thought would have gotten a CDI unit first. Now, pretty much every state, although I think Alaska doesn't have one, maybe Maine or something doesn't have one, but pretty much every state has one except for like a few states at this point. From July to August 2013, we prepared for and participated in grand jury proceedings directed at obtaining indictments against 3 doctors, a non-attorney claimant representative, and approximately 71 disability beneficiaries who, it is alleged, received approximately $2.1 million in fraudulent benefits. The indictment alleges, and our investigation found evidence that Torres Crespo worked with physicians and individual claimants to submit false claims for SSA disability benefits. The doctor allegedly charged the patient a fee, in addition to the regular medical charges, of between $150 to $500, and Torres Crespo allegedly received 25% of each claimant's retroactive disability benefits, not to exceed $6,000 per claimant. All right, that's what it was, 25% of the back pay. In August, we deployed an additional NYFD personnel, 2 supervisors and 2 special agents to San Juan to coordinate and conduct investigative activities and arrest logistics. On August 12th, even as we headed to the grand jury, the PRPD joined the San Juan CDI unit, and the unit officially opened, staffed by an OIG special agent, 2 SSA program experts, and 2 PRPD investigators. A week later, on August 19th, the grand jury returned indictment on 75 subjects, and we deployed 7 additional NYFD agents and 5 investigative response team members to San Juan to prepare for the arrest operations. So they were going to go corral all these disabled people up that weren't actually disabled. Early in the morning on August 21st, the arrest operation began with 19 OIG special agents and over 125 FBI agents and over 100 Puerto Rico Police Department officers. Again, when they went to go arrest them all, 19 OIG special agents, 125 FBI agents, and 100 Puerto Rico Police Department officers. All but 5 arrests were accomplished in the first 4 hours. 4 of the remaining subjects were on the mainland and later surrendered to authorities, while 1 subject was arrested in Puerto Rico several days later. A basketball arena in San Juan was used to detain and process the arrestees with the help of the U.S. Marshal Service and the U.S. Magistrate. Just imagine that. There was so much Social Security fraud that they had to get a literal basketball arena to house all of the fraudsters that they were able to bring in after bringing in over 200 people to find and arrest them all. That's spicy. That is you're putting some mustard on there that zings. Your tongue wants a vacation after that sandwich, let me tell you. All right, Harry Bear, thank you for the $9.99 donation. Also, thank you for being a member. That's absolutely amazing. He has the silver icon, which is great. It says feeling good, trigger point shots worth every penny. That's good. Sometimes those shots do really well, so I always love seeing that. Sometimes they don't help as much, but I'm glad to see when somebody gets them and they feel good, because it's way better than the alternative. So okay, looking to what the future holds. Again, though, Harry Bear, thank you. That's awesome. Looking to what the future holds, the investigation is still ongoing, with additional arrests expected. In addition, a special telephone hotline established to receive tips and other information connected to the investigation has been active, with over 100 calls received, as in the 855-777-0821, but you don't need to know that. As part of this testimony, I feel it is also critical to give a historical context. This is where they're going to throw Puerto Rico under the bus a little bit, but you're going to learn Puerto Rico is a hot spot. As part of this testimony, I feel it is also critical to give a historical context for the OIG's involvement in a focus on combating third-party facilitator fraud. From our inception, we were aware that criminal investigations of this nature, those involving facilitators responsible for multiple fraudulent benefit applications, would serve a critical role in our efforts to prevent, detect, and prosecute. One of our earliest investigations of this exact nature was the driving force behind the establishment of the highly successful CDI program, with which you are all very familiar. This case from the state of Washington originated in 1992. Okay, so going way back. way back to 1992, when the Department of Health and Human Services, OIG, was responsible for conducting Social Security fraud investigations. A task force comprising the FBI and some 7 other federal agencies, as well as 5 state agencies, has been looking into allegations that middlemen were serving and helping former refugees from Cambodia and Vietnam to defraud Washington's welfare system and the SSA's disability program. Once the SSA OIG was created and our Seattle field division was established, those agents assumed a leading role in this investigation, which continued until 1999. When the last defendants were sentenced, in short, refugees from these war-torn areas were allowed to enter the United States and were relocated to Washington, where they were given an 18-month stipend and language and vocational training. At the end of the 18 months, however, a number of these immigrants worked with the middlemen who would coach them on how to obtain state and federal disability benefits for fees as high as $3,000. The middlemen told their clients not to sleep or shower for several days before their benefit interviews and to dress poorly, all in an attempt to appear mentally disabled. They acted as interpreters during the interview, providing the interviewer with answers aimed at obtaining benefits. The middlemen also facilitated medical and psychological exams, manipulating those visits in similar ways to obtain medical reports that would result in benefit allowances. So in other words, we're talking like fraud, not like little fraud here, little fraud. We're talking organized fraud here, okay? Our investigation included reviewing over 2,500 claim folders and identifying over 650 that appeared fraudulent, conducting more than 150 confrontational interviews, surveillance, and other techniques to uncover the fact that many of these individuals were not only physically and mentally fit, but were employed or even operating their own businesses. Ultimately, more than 40 individuals were successfully prosecuted, including 2 middlemen, 6 state welfare workers, a doctor and his wife, and 30 benefit recipients. SSA assessed more than $4 million in overpayments and estimated $11 million in savings, and the courts ordered more than $1 million in restitution. SSA also estimated $7 million in savings from other in-pay beneficiaries who came forward with news of arrest broke, when news of the arrest broke and disclaimed their eligibility, fearing prosecution. In 1999, Vice President Gore's national partnership with Reinventing the Government bestowed a Hammer Award on the task force that conducted this investigation. So in other words, Vice President Gore, they got an Hammer Award, because they were able to catch all these people. This goes back to the 90s. I'm providing this level of detail about a 15-year-old case for several reasons. First, as I've already mentioned, it was this Seattle case that in substantial part inspired the CDI program, about which I've, remember, it ties to Puerto Rico too, testified many times before this subcommittee. Given your familiarity with CDI, I won't take time to describe it today, but I'd happy to answer questions, blah, blah, blah. Secondly, this case demonstrates that our commitment to facilitator fraud is not new, nor does it end with our success in Puerto Rico. And finally, it helps to answer questions we've received about the duration of the Puerto Rican investigation. Over 3.5 years from receipt of the first allegation to the arrest operation in August, and the similarly complex Seattle case covered even more time, allowing me to demonstrate exactly how long operations like this take. The level of commitment to cases such as these is significant. The Seattle case involved 12 federal and state agencies and took 6 years. The Puerto Rico operation involved 3 agencies and took less than 4 years. In both cases, about half the time was spent on developing the allegation, planning the investigation, addressing cultural and language issues, and reviewing vast amounts of data and documents. The other half of time was spent on active investigation, grand juries, and on court appearances. There are no shortcuts. All right, so the point that I'm getting at with this whole document, we can keep going and going through it, is one thing you have to understand is that, and this is actually very interesting, Puerto Rico tends to create organized scams, or at least they used to back in the day. And I would see them pop up from time to time. And the major scams that I saw were that basically there were certain attorneys that were working with certain doctors and certain individuals to get them to be found disabled. There was also a rule which President Trump stopped. And then all the Democrats said it was horrible and it was racist and how dare he and yada, yada. But the rule was that they were no longer going to go ahead and give disability benefits in an aggressive and heavy-handed way to people who could only speak Spanish and not English, because that was part of the rule specifically for, limited capacity to read and write, right? Because if you couldn't read and write in English, then, yada, yada. So basically, Trump got rid of that rule. And when he did that, a lot of the, very wealthy at that time, Social Security disability attorneys and non-legal reps in Puerto Rico they got cut off because a lot of them couldn't go ahead and work those claims to get people found disabled because they were able to speak a language where they could literally get through. They could go to Home Depot or Walmart or this place or that place or any place in Puerto Rico and be able to communicate just fine to live their life. So he got rid of that rule. When Trump did in his first term get rid of that rule, man, the Democrat side went frenzied, absolutely frenzied about how he could do that and how horrible of a person he is and how dare he and yada, yada, and so on and so forth. And what that ultimately comes down to, just to kind of keep this in mind, is that there were a lot of people being found disabled who played that game. You know, they didn't have an education or they didn't have this, didn't have that, yada, yada. Some people were literally going and breaking into schools to destroy their name being at that high school, their name being at that college, their name, whatever. They were trying to get rid of that information so that basically when they did the investigation, they could grid the person out based off of lesser education. And so there was a lot of fraud with that. Okay. And one of the things that I have to keep in mind when I see these two groups, these two political entities arguing back and forth, is that usually, the strong grip of the Democrats to hold on to their Social Security voters, it's weak right now. They don't have a good grasp. And, you know, obviously people are now kind of awakened to this idea that, hey, if the economy is failing, Social Security people get hurt the most. And economies don't do great under, you know, Democrats. This is how it is. So the bottom line here that you have to kind of keep in mind is that we don't want fraud, we don't want waste, but we also want a really good economy. So I'm hoping that the Democrats, who are kind of like the leaders when it comes to innovation, I'm hoping that they'll come out with plans. You know, I'm an independent, I'm a middle guy, but I'm hoping they'll come out with plans in the future that will specifically push for a better economy that makes actual sense. Not like the whole super green energy. We're going to throw trillions into green energy and magically it's going to all be amazing. Look, if you want green energy, what you want is thermos bottle cold fusion. You want dark energy, you know, as your main source of creation energy. This idea of creating these massive wind farms, you know, basically destroying and not being able to use the land for basically these solar farms, that is the worst thing you could do. It's the worst thing you could do. Spend the money on innovating fusion. Spend the money on quantum physics for dark energy production. That's where the big money is actually at. So, you know, bottom line, looking at the classic thing here, so you kind of understand the spectrum of it, we really want the fragile class, retired, disabled, you know, widows, spouses, you know, disabled. We want them to be protected. They are the fragile class of individuals. The only way we're going to be able to do that is by making sure the economy in America is incredible. Because when the economy is good, things are cheap. When things are cheap, our super consumers, the retired, disabled, the people who get money and then spend money, and they get money and they spend money. Every month you get that check, every month you spend that check. They're super consumers. They live a much better standard of living. So, you know, getting rid of this fraud, and I know you're going to see in the news, like everybody's like, oh, you know, there wasn't that much fraud. There was billions and billions and billions of fraud. Okay. Historically, we've had fraud in this for a long time because it's a big purse and there's a lot of money going out of it. But we don't want fraud because it's going to make things worse for the Social Security recipients. I know people who lean left and a lot of people who talk about Social Security benefits lean super left. I just want you to understand at the end of the day that unfortunately, you have to have a middle kind of look at this. You have to laugh at both parties and study both parties and understand what's good and bad from both of them. All right. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful weekend, a happy, happy Labor Day. I'll catch you all a little bit later. Please remember to like. Many of you don't hit that like button. I really would love to see you hit that like button. Please remember to like and subscribe. Head over to Google also and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. Throw some stars up there if you like. That always makes me happy in the morning. Also, I don't do Medicare benefits. I don't sign people up. So if you want to get a check to see if you have a really good plan for you, let them do a tune-up on your Medicare Advantage program. Give them a call, 339-226-6287. All the people I've sent there to go ahead and get a check-in have come back. They've been happy. I've had zero bad complaints. I've had zero unhappy people. So, I mean, bottom line is give them a call, 15, 20 minutes. It's a free call. They'll hook you up with, you know, whatever is going to be a great plan that works with your medical, you know, medication, medical therapies, upcoming surgeries, whatever. And then also check with them because there's been massive fraud in the Medicare field. They've been watching it very closely. So check in with them about that to see if your current plan is potentially affected by it. All right. I will catch you all a little bit later. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. And I go live on Mondays and Thursdays. So I might go live tonight to answer questions for free, but it is a holiday. And then, of course, if you want a 1 hour or 30-minute private consultation where you tell me some legal issue you're having, mini contract is below. I'll catch you a little bit later. Have a wonderful Labor Day, and we'll rock and roll from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, and thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.